Happy Friday, everyone. It's Jennifer Fox of N Fox High Performance Coaching, and welcome to Fox Talks. I'm so glad you're here. So, before we jump in, just a few things to help you get the most out of today. So, our session today will last approximately 30 minutes. We start on time, end on time, because your time really matters. You'll be getting a replay link right after this session for 7 days of access. Use it. Go back to it. I promise these tools land differently every time you revisit them. And while we won't be unmuting microphones today, I want this to be interactive. So please use the chat throughout. The more you engage, the more this will feel like coaching, not just content. The other thing I need you to do, grab a notebook or a journal or a piece of paper to jot down reflections that we'll ask you today. Take a lot of notes. Clarity, we find, comes faster when you capture your insights in real time. And just to frame this conversation, this is work I practice myself. Even as a coach, I come back to these tools whenever my own calendar starts to get too full. And the more you practice them, the more powerful and peaceful your leadership becomes. So let's get started. So, the power to say no has always hit really hard for me because truthfully, I always like being the yes person. Part of it, it's curiosity. I have a lot of interests. Things like spur my curiosity. I get excited about new ideas. There's so many shiny, interesting things out there that I really find I want to be a part of. But it's also identity. For years, I believed saying yes was what made me successful. I wanted to be known as the doer, the one who got things done, who made things happen. I wore GSD, get stuff done, like a badge of honor. And for a while, it really worked. Every yes opened a door, every yes built my reputation. But somewhere along the way, I realized something. I was busy, but not always productive. I was saying yes to a lot of things, but not necessarily the right things. I wanted to be seen as successful, and doing all of these things became my proof of accomplishment. The problem was, I wasn't really present in most of them. I'd show up, sure, but part of my mind was already racing to the next commitment. I'd sit in meetings thinking about emails and sometimes not so secretly responding to emails. I'd be with my family thinking about work. And eventually, the constant motion stopped feeling like progress. It just felt like noise. And I suspect many of you have been there too. The place where you're achieving, accomplishing, saying yes to everything. But inside, you feel tired. And I don't mean just physically tired, but mentally and emotionally stretched. So I want you to put in the chat if that resonates, if you've ever found yourself running on empty because you couldn't find your no, just drop a quick me in the chat or a thumbs up in the reaction because I know you're in good company here. Yep, I'm seeing it. What I didn't see right away was the hidden cost of overcommitment. Every unnecessary yes drained a little more focus, a little more energy, and a little more joy. It showed up as depletion, not just fatigue, but that low level burnout that makes even the things you love feel heavy. That sense that you're always doing, but never done. Also, and all those yeses that once helped me succeed really started working against me. And that's because I wasn't curating my yeses, I was scattering them. And it didn't just happen at work, it showed up everywhere with friends, volunteer projects, family events. I was stretched so thin that I started showing up as a version of myself I didn't even like, frustrated, snapping at people, and snapping especially at the people I cared about, running late, rescheduling constantly. Sound familiar, anyone? The irony was my desire to show up as a great leader, a great friend, a great contributor was exactly what kept me from being one. And that's when I started realizing courage isn't always about doing more. Let me say that again. Courage isn't always about doing more. Sometimes it's about doing less on purpose. That realization changed everything for me because when we say yes too often, it doesn't just fill our calendar, it empties our energy. It drains our focus, our joy, and our ability to lead with courage. And that's the hidden cost of overcommitment. Burnout that sneaks up quietly and steals your best self. So, today we're going to talk about how to reframe boundaries, not as walls that keep people out, but as gates that protect what matters most. We'll explore why saying no feels so hard and how guilt shows up when you try, and how to use the NFOX calm method to say no with confidence and calm. Because sometimes courage isn't this roar, this big movement. It's the quiet strength to say, thank you, but not this time. So let's start with why this feels so uncomfortable in the first place. When you even think about saying no, your brain says social risk. We are wired to belong. So anything that might disappoint someone, it feels like danger, even when it isn't. That's why your heart races, your stomach flips when you want to decline something. This isn't your brain being dramatic. It's just saying, wait, are we still safe if we say no? And the problem is that instinct to please or protect other people can quietly turn into a habit of overcommitting. And every unnecessary yes steals energy from something that actually matters. So here's a question for the chat. Where do you notice this the most in your own life? Do you notice this in work, with your family, friendships, volunteering? Type it in the chat because awareness is the first step toward alignment. So, when we keep saying yes out of guilt, fear, or habit, we end up busy, but not impactful, active, but not aligned. And that slow leak of energy is what eventually leads to the burnout, not all at once, but little by little, until we wake up one day running on fumes. So, if you've been feeling stretched thin, or there's never quite enough of you to go around, it's not because you're doing too little, it's because you're doing too much of what doesn't align. That's not weakness, that's wiring. Your mind equates being needed with being valuable. And when that pattern goes unchecked, it turns care into exhaustion. So let's say that again. Your mind equates being needed with being valuable. The truth is, Burnout doesn't arrive as a crash. It doesn't happen all at once. It builds quietly through hundreds of small, well intentioned yeses. And this is where your courage comes in, because courage isn't about powering through it or pretending you can handle it all. It's about pausing long enough to ask the right question. And that question is this, and I want you to write it down. Is this yes serving my purpose, or is it just protecting my image? That single question can shift everything. So, here's another thing I'd like you to reflect on and write it down. There's a lot of reflections today that I want you to think about after our session. So, what I'd like you to do is think about the last commitment you said yes to. And I want you to ask yourself, was it aligned with what really matters? Or was it an automatic response, a reflex to be helpful, liked, or seen as capable? So there's no judgment with this reflection, it's just notice. I'd like you to write that in your journal. Yeah, and I'm definitely seeing a lot of responses to this, and I appreciate that. And the reason why we write it in your journal is because awareness is where courage starts. You can't change a pattern you haven't named. So now that you understand the why this feels so hard and how overcommitment quietly drains your best energy, let's talk about the what next. Because once you start saying no, another emotion starts showing up right on cue. And it's not fear, it's guilt. All right. So let's talk about that guilt, because it's usually the very first thing that shows up the moment you start saying no. That tug in your chest, that quick thought, they're going to be disappointed, or they're going to be disappointed in me. That wave of discomfort that makes you want to backpedal so fast and say yes again. Sound familiar? I'm raising my hand on that one. So here's what I want you to know. Guilt does not mean that you're doing something wrong. It usually means you're doing something new. So think about this. Because you've said yes so often, you've trained the people around you and yourself to expect your yes. They know that if they ask, good chance you're going to say yes. And so when you start changing that pattern, your brain sounds the alarm, right? It's saying danger, danger. Not because you're out of integrity, but because you're breaking a habit. I like to think of that as growth soreness. It's the emotional equivalent of a muscle adapting to a heavier weight. It's like walking up the stairs after a really hard leg day at the gym. Kind of hurts, right? You're saying, ow. It's uncomfortable, but it's also proof that you're getting stronger. So when I first started practicing this, I remember being invited to join a nonprofit's board committee. It was a cause I believed in and people that I really admired. And my default response was yes. I already was about to say yes without thinking about it. But I knew deep down that I didn't have the capacity to serve them the way that I wanted to. I knew that at that moment, there were higher priority commitments in my life, my clients, my team, my family, and they needed my full presence too. Still, hitting send on that polite but firm no email was excruciating. I felt like part of me was saying no to something good. And part of me worried that they'd think I wasn't committed, that I'd lose credibility or connection. And that's the same fear many of us feel at work when a no might cost approval, reputation. maybe even opportunity for that promotion or next new big assignment. But here's the truth. Every misaligned yes costs you something too. It costs you your energy, your focus, and yes, your performance. Because you can't be exceptional when you're stretched across everything. And here's what high performers know: they don't do all things, they do the right things exceptionally well. So think about that. It's not about doing everything, it's about doing the right things exceptionally well. So it's worth asking yourself, am I doing many things so so, or fewer things with excellence? So here's another reflection for you to write down, okay? Take a quick inventory of your week. Since it's Friday, it's a great time to do a reflection of your week. Are you operating from excellence or obligation? Are you giving your best energy to your highest priorities? Or are you scattering that energy across everything else that's asking for attention? So, again, just notice this is not guilt. We're not piling on. It's just awareness. So, back to my example where I said no. So, I sent the email, I said no. And the next morning, I actually felt lighter, not because it was easy, but because it was right. I had made a decision that honored my values and my capacity. And this is when I realized that the guilt fades. It's still there, but it faded. The peace and the confidence that I felt in that decision is what really stayed. So let's continue this reflection. Where does guilt show up for you when you try to protect your time and energy? Let me say that again. Where does guilt show up for you when you try to protect your time or energy? Maybe it happens when you're saying no to extra work. Maybe it's skipping an event you don't have the capacity for. Or maybe it's simply asking for help instead of powering through. So write it down. And if you feel comfortable, drop a word in the chat, because awareness is that first act of courage. So, and here's the reframe I want you to hold on to: I am not letting them down. I'm finally showing up for myself. Because every time you say no, you're actually saying yes to something that matters more. No to the extra meeting that they really don't need you at is yes to focus. No to the obligation is yes to presence with your family. No to the unimportant means more focus on the meaningful. So this isn't rejection, it's redirection. And this is where your courage starts to take root, not in the loud, bold moments, but in the quiet, consistent choices that align your energy with your purpose. So, what I'm about to teach next isn't a theory that we made up on a whiteboard. We developed the NFOX CALM method through research and repeated practice, drawing on behavioral science, leadership communication, and what actually works in real life. So, this framework isn't hypothetical, it's been tested, refined, and proven in action. So, one of the first things that I do want to let you know about this method is you can't and shouldn't say no to everything. Okay. While we're saying how to say no, you can't and shouldn't say no to everything that comes your way. Some things will always deserve a yes: your core responsibilities, your people, your purpose. But courage asks something deeper of us: to align our yeses with our values and no with our limits. So, and that's where the Fox Calm method comes in. It's a simple, repeatable framework you can use anytime you feel pressured to say yes when you know you shouldn't, or you're just not sure yet. So, CALM stands for this: C, check the cost; A, acknowledge the ask; L, lead with your values; and M, move it forward. So we're going to go through this letter by letter. So the first is C, check the cost. Before you say yes, pause. Ask yourself, what will this cost my time, my energy, or my alignment? Most of us underestimate the hidden cost of one more yes. Our brain always thinks that we can do things a lot faster than we can, and we assume that we can always make it happen. So I have to tell this story and share this one. I just met with a client earlier this week who said yes to something they thought would take 15 minutes. So on the face of it, no problem, I can bust this out. It ended up taking 2 hours, 2 additional hours at work. We've all been there, right? I'm raising my hand because I always underestimate how long things take and get myself in trouble. So we tell ourselves, oh, it's quick, I can squeeze it in. But what we forget to calculate is the real cost. It's the time, the intention, the transition energy, what we also call switching cost, it requires to do it well. So the question is, am I being honest with myself about the time and attention this will actually take? So that's what check the cost really means. Not just do I have space on my calendar, but do I have the focus and energy to give this the quality it deserves? Another client once said, I don't have time to exercise. I think something that we all have probably said at one point or time. But when we look closer, their days were packed with unfiltered yeses. They said yes to everything. So there were extra calls, unscheduled favors, meetings they didn't need to attend. So it wasn't time that they lacked, it was boundaries. So here's a check in question. Think about a recent yes that turned out to be more costly than you expected. If you could do it again, what would you protect? Your time, your focus, or your peace? So write it down or share a word in the chat. So I'm looking over at the chat. I'm seeing quite a few things. Love this. So one of the phrases that I really like is you can't pour from an empty cup. I have no idea who originally said it, but it's a phrase that I've heard and I really like it because it's so true. You can't live with purpose when you're perpetually depleted. So protect that cup. So the next one is A, acknowledge the ask. So respect builds trust. Start every no with appreciation. A simple thank you for thinking of me. I really appreciate the invitation. This softens the conversation and shows you care without surrendering your capacity. And sometimes courage means giving yourself the space to think before deciding. It's perfectly acceptable to say, this sounds like a great opportunity. Let me check my schedule and workload to make sure I can do this effectively. Then actually do it. Step back, look at your commitments, and check the cost. You may realize that this opportunity would stretch you too thin, and you can protect your no. Or with a little reflection, you might see that this genuinely moves you forward and is worth a confident yes. That difference is discernment. You've created space to respond intentionally instead of reactively. So I want you to think about where in your life do you tend to say yes automatically, and what might change if you built in a pause before answering. So the last one, L, lead with your values. Don't just explain what you can't do, share what you are choosing instead. And that's how your no becomes a statement of integrity, not avoidance. You might say, I'm focusing on this key project right now, or my focus is on delivering meaningful progress in a few key areas we've already committed to. When you name the value behind your decision, you remind both yourself and others that your choices are intentional, rooted in excellence, not ego. I use this one constantly. If a colleague or partner asks me to take on something new, I'll often say, I appreciate the opportunity. It's a great idea. Right now, with my bandwidth, it's committed on other priorities, and I wouldn't be able to give it the attention this deserves. It's respectful, it's professional, and it communicates clarity without apologies. And apparently, I can't spell the word calm because I said L was the last, but I forgot the M. M, move it forward. Finally, keep the relation intact by offering a next step if it's appropriate. Then stop talking. It could sound like, here's someone who might be a great fit to do this, or let's revisit this next quarter. Boundaries and generosity can coexist. You can close a loop gracefully without overcommitting. One of our clients used this at work by redirecting an opportunity to a colleague, and her no actually built her reputation as a strategic, collaborative leader. So, where could you apply Move It Forward this week in a way that protects your energy and strengthens a relationship? So, that's the calm method. It's simple, compassionate, and clear. Because when you stay calm, you stay in control. And that's where real courage lives, not in chaos or guilt, but in grounded, intentional choice. So I'm looking at the clock right now and I see that it's 2:27. And so we've got a little bit more to finish. What we will also be sending in addition to the replay of this is a mini habit builder, what we call the courageous no. So when we send this to you, it's a 4-step mini habit builder that helps you identify the overdue no, walk it through the calm process and methodology, then create your courageous no statement. Kind of like what I just said. The courageous no statement is, thank you for thinking of me. This sounds like a great initiative. Right now, my focus is on completing our current deliverables, so I won't be able to take this on, but I gladly revisit it next quarter if it still aligns with your priorities. And then anchoring that habit. So when we send you this habit practice, I want you to really look at in the next week. Use your courageous no once, just once in the next 7 days. It could be at work, at home, or anywhere you tend to overcommit. And when you do, pause and notice what changed. Did your stress level change? Did your confidence change or your presence change? Because every clear, intentional no becomes a vote for the life and leadership you actually want. So, boundaries aren't walls that keep people out. They're gates that protect your purpose. Saying yes to everything might look productive, but it can quietly pull you away from who you want to be. Saying no with courage helps you return to what truly matters. We started today with the idea that courage isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet, a thoughtful pause, a respectful decline, a calm alignment with your priorities. So as you move through the week, carry this question with you. Where would one clear no create more calm, confidence, or capacity in my life? That's your next area of courage, because courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it sounds like, thank you, but not this time. So, if today's session resonated with you, I encourage you to experience what this work feels like in a coaching conversation. David and I reserve a limited number of complimentary strategy sessions each month. Private one-on-one coaching designed to help you identify the next big shift in your focus, courage, or leadership. There's no cost and no pressure, just clarity. You'll receive an email after this session with a link to schedule your session. And we'd love your feedback on this session and topics for the future. So when you get that email, just hit reply and let us know what stood out most and what you'd like to see next. Your insights help make every Fox Talk more relevant and powerful for you. And next month's theme is productivity. It's one that you're not going to want to miss. Thank you so much for joining me today, for showing up, engaging, and practicing the courage to create calm. We'll see you next time on Fox Talks.